As stacked as the new fall season is with regards to sequels, there's not many promising looking new ones. There's Dan, which isn't even a fantasy or isekai, then one or two others that only look semi-decent. I'm hoping I'm wrong since last season was pretty slow too, but at least we have the return of a lot of tried and true anime. So, to start things off with the sequels, first we have the highly anticipated Re:Zero Season 3. It's been 3 years since Season 2, so if you're a bit fuzzy on what happened then, I got you covered since I'm actually making a full Re:Zero recap video. Just a quick summary of the main events, then a closer look into the topics that you'll want to know for Season 3. Now, if you're someone who's been lucky enough to watch Season 3's massive 90-minute first episode early, then you'd already know that we're in for something special here. The first hour was a bit slow with all the setup, but the last half hour brings us exactly what we love from Re:Zero. It ensures from episode 2 we'll be right in the thick of it. It takes place a year after the events of Season 2, and with the Amelia camp now fully united, they must overcome the crisis awaiting them in Anastasia's city of Pristella. It's a new setting with characters familiar and new, leading Subaru against what's probably his toughest opponents yet. The anime itself will be split into 2 parts of 8 episodes each, the first being the attack arc starting October 2nd, then the next being the counterattack airing February 5th. So, while the first part ends early in November and the second starts later into the winter, at least we won't have to wait an entire season between them. Now, before we get into the next anime, in addition to all these new anime to watch from next season, I've also got an amazing recommendation for you to read as well. With today's sponsor web novel, you can read the first legendary Beastmaster amongst a plethora of other amazing stories. This one in particular takes that core theme of beast taming, then fleshes it out in a way that very few stories have done before. Yes, there is an overarching conflict involving politics and war, but the main draw here is the focus on the beasts. Like, imagine a story where Aura from Overlord was the protagonist. The beasts are all key characters as well, and the role they serve is more than just to make the main character stronger. So, if you're looking for a series with a power system different from what we usually get, the first legendary Beastmaster is definitely for you. You can read it on web novel using my link down in the description, along with other amazing stories like Solo Leveling, Mushoku Tensei, and even Eminence in Shadow. There's thousands of amazing reads, both familiar and new, waiting for you. Just click the link down below to gain access to them. But anyway, next we have Spirit Chronicles Season 2, which is the isekai where the protagonist's past and current life intersect with each other. There's the orphan Ryo who already existed in the current world, then the student Haruto who died in his previous world. It was one day that Ryo woke up with the memories of Haruto, and that's pretty much where the story begins. Season 1 was mostly an introduction to the world, characters, and protagonists, so in Season 2 you can expect to get more into the bulk of the story. It will have more of those standard fantasy tropes though, so there'll probably be a waifu that needs saving, then that waifu will probably end up joining his harem. That being the case, if you like Season 1 then you're definitely gonna like Season 2. Everyone's favorite edgy protagonist returns with Arifureta Season 3, this time separating from the conflict with his classmates and instead getting into a revolution with the Halia. After leaving the capital and heading to the Empire, Hajime finds Sheia's tribe to be in the middle of fighting the Empire, a point made extremely clear by the number of heads being chopped off. This will be the new conflict Hajime gets involved in, along with the new labyrinth and more harem stuff. It seems they might be exploring more of Hajime's character this season, that and his dynamic with his harem. Another returning video game fantasy is Gun Gale Online and its P90 Rusher Len, a series some of you may know is actually one of my personal favorites. Ever since the Death Gun arc in SAO, I've been a big fan of the shooter-style world GGO is known for. The whole anime battle royale thing just appeals to that part of me that's addicted to FPS games. So, to see Len and her crew back playing GGO like it's Warzone, well, that's an itch I've been wanting scratched for a while now. As for what you can expect, well, aside from Len taking advantage of her broken character model, there's another Squad Jam tournament that she'll be competing in. It'll be more or less the same action and BS we've come to expect, at least up until that tournament is over. Other fantasy sequels include the Beyond the Snow saga for Blue Exorcist, Season 2 for the revamped sequel of 7 Deadly Sins, then the 2 isekais of Demon Lord Retry and Tensei Kizaku. All except Demon Lord Retry aired less than a year ago, so if you watch the first season, not much should be very different in the second. As for this new installment of Demon Lord Retry, it's an adaptation of the manga's sequel, something that came out shortly after the anime's first season. So, this will be a brand new production with the new studio and everything, focusing on the Demon Lord and his mysterious encounter in a dungeon. It also veers from the light comedy of the first season and approaches topics a little bit darker. There is still some comedy mixed in, but apparently it's layered with some truly villainous behavior too. I can't say the quality looks any better than the first season, but perhaps the story will be entertaining enough to make up for it. Lastly, we have Season 5 of DanMachi, which, just like Re:Zero, I'll also be doing a recap for. If you're not caught up, then I highly recommend you do, since Season 4 was amazing and Season 5 is gonna be even better. This too I had the opportunity to watch early, and I can tell you the quality and plot have quite a bit going for it. For me, the story seems like it's about to get really interesting, since if you've been wondering about Sierra and the Freya familia, that whole subplot is about to come to the forefront. It seems the mystery behind their connection is gonna be unraveled soon. This brings us now to all the new anime, which if we start with the isekai, we first have Loner Life in Another World. It's a novel with a premise similar to Arifureta, where an entire class of students get isekai'd one day. The unique thing about our protagonist though is that, just like the title states, he's a loner. He's an outsider who thought he could restart by getting whatever cheat skill he wanted. Unfortunately, all the cheat skills were taken by all the other students, so the only skill he could get was, you guessed it, the loner skill. One that makes him incapable of joining a party. This makes him a recluse just like how he was in his old life, up until circumstances force him to interact with his classmates. It's until then though you'll learn about his loner type powers, along with his completely ridiculous attitude towards everything. Like, when I say this character's ridiculous, I really mean it. So, if you want to see an isekai with a quirky protagonist and somewhat unique powers, then Loner Life in Another World might be worth checking out for you. Next, we have the seasonal Villainess anime, since it wouldn't be a new season without at least one of them. This one comes from Studio Maho Film, and it adapts the light novel, I'll Become a Villainess Who Goes Down in History. It's a fairly standard take on the whole villainous trope, except the unique thing here is that the main character chooses to embrace her role as the villainess. Rather than try to avoid the bad ending surely awaiting her, she instead chooses to fully commit to the role she reincarnated into and become the greatest villainess the world has ever known. The thing is, the more she tries, the more the people around her start to like her. So, all in all, it's your seasonal dose of shoujo fantasy. Now, the rest of the anime are more traditional fantasies, so let's start things off with what I think looks best. This is Demon Lord 2099, another anime from JC Staff, taking the whole Demon Lord resurrection theme and throwing it into the future. It's been 500 years since the Demon Lord was defeated, and with Japan now this cyberpunk metropolis, his reawakened self must come to terms with the changed landscape around him. It's a unique premise that finally answers the question I'm sure all of us have had at least once before. Why do these fantasies always have to take place in a medieval setting? Well, even though this world is still filled with magic, at least it's combined with engineering to make it more of a sci-fi fantasy. It's a take on the genre that we haven't yet seen before, one I'm genuinely interested to see how it progresses. There's actually two other fantasy anime JC Staff are doing this season, and one is the time travel romance of the Over Damsel Conquers the Dragon Emperor, while the other is the stories of girls who couldn't be magicians. The former is a second chance redo revolving around an executed princess and her engagement, while the latter is an artistic slice of life focusing on a girl and her journey on becoming a mage candidate. They both seem to have somewhat decent potential, but what I'm more curious to see is how the quality stands more towards the end of the season. 4.5 concurrent anime is no joke. I mean, sure, some of this was probably outsourced, but even with JC Staff being as big as it is, I can't imagine this wasn't quite the crunch for them. But anyway, next we have the healer who was banished from his party is in fact the strongest, a standard fantasy portraying what it's like to be in the wrong field of work. Here we have a healer kicked out of his party for not doing his job, only to reveal he's not really a healer at all. He's instead a close quarters fighter who's actually really strong. Why then was he in a party as a healer? Well, those are the questions that keep me up at night. It's something I'm sure we'll figure out when we watch it. I don't think this is an anime I'll personally get into, but if it ends up being good, then come back and let me know in the comments. This next one I was actually fairly interested in because of the title, but after realizing Notorious Talker didn't mean he literally talked shit to everyone, my disappointment was immeasurable and my day was ruined. I truly thought this was a gaming anime about a generational shit talker. Turns out Talker is actually just his job class, and while the position itself comes with zero combat skills whatsoever, it does prove useful in fulfilling the goal he's set up for himself. He's able to use his skills to unite all sorts of powerful people under him. This leads into the whole running the world's greatest clan thing, which could prove interesting given its departure from the standard action fantasy. Up next is Goodbye Dragon Life, which is the story of the strongest dragon reincarnating in the body of a human. He now lives as a regular villager, enjoying his peaceful life far away from the challenges of being a dragon. That is until he meets a human-snake hybrid, becomes friends with her, then sets off on an adventure together. This leads to a dynamic of monsters trying to get along with humans and all the standard fantasy stuff that comes along with it. An interesting looking comedic fantasy is Studio Zero G's adaptation of Let This Grieving Soul Retire, a story that centers itself around a Masayuki type character. In a world where treasure hunters are more prevalent than ever, one person's legend reigns above the rest. The thing is, this legend kind of manifested on its own. You see, while he is revered by most as one of the best treasure hunters out there, our protagonist hasn't actually done anything. So, the anime is him and the people around him, building him up as this amazing person when in actuality he's really just normal. Kinda like an anime where Masayuki is the main character. Finally, we have Nina the Starry Bride, which is more of a serious romance fantasy catered towards the josei audience. I'm not sure it's something a lot of you would be interested in, but it is rated fairly highly for its well-developed plot and characters. So if you're interested in a more grounded fantasy centered around Nina and her hardships, this might be something worth checking out for you. But yeah, that's every isekai and fantasy coming out this season. As I said, there aren't very many decent-looking new ones, but the sequels are definitely here to carry us. If there was something you saw that stood out to you though, be sure to let me know down in the comments. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!